From time to time when I'm working with clients, they ask the question, is it possible for me to remember to tap when I need to tap? And sometimes they're asking the question jokingly, but surprisingly, the answer is actually yes. There are things that we can do with tapping to help us to remember things, to help us to remember in the moment, and to help our long-term cognitive memory ability. Today, I have an amazing conversation with Dr. Peta Stapleton about all of the research around tapping and memory and how you can implement it every single day to make a difference in your daily life. This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 582. It originally aired October 16th, 2023. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to spend a little time with me. Thanks for hanging out today. Today, I have an absolutely amazing conversation with Dr. Peta Stapleton on how you can use tapping to improve your memory, how tapping relates to memory, and most importantly, how you can start using it every single day. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Stapleton. So whenever someone takes a huge amount of time to write a book, there usually is a connection to it. I had a friend of mine who, when he was getting ready to do his doctoral thesis, his thesis advisor said, "So can you live with the topic for the next 5 years?" Which I think is really, a good question to ask when we're doing something big. And so this is a big project that took a lot of time. Why were you interested in thinking about memory and seeing what the research and connecting tapping and all of that? What's kind of the backstory that got us here? And then we'll talk about the great stuff that's in the book.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you. So during some distant worldwide pandemic that we all experienced in the early days, I obviously was at home with the family and had my collection of books that I thought, oh yes, I've got books that I need to read that I haven't read and they're piling up and I've got a bit more space. And one of the books that I read was a book called Moonwalking with Einstein. Absolutely recommend anyone read it. What it was about was the US Memory Championships. And I was only reading this for pleasure and was fascinated. Great story, well worth reading. However, I realized in reading it that for a long time, I'd actually taught my students here at the university how to use discrete tapping to access their stored learning memory in exam situations. So they might kind of discretely tap. And I realized I used to tap when I walked into a room and couldn't remember why I was there. So I'd been using it for this memory. And of course, at that time, had a bit of space, as we did, and decided I should put pen to paper here and write my ideas down. And obviously that was the inspiration, was reading Moonwalking with Einstein. But I realized I'd been doing this in the education setting for many, many years and teaching students how to supercharge learning and use tapping to access memory, even to remember people's names. So that's actually the backstory.
And so as you say that, and as I think about memory and places to improve memory, for me, there's three things that strike me, and I'd be interested to see if this makes your list or if there is more. But I think about, how can I learn things faster? How can I remember things in a moment? And what are the things that I can do so that in a long-term way, as I age and my memory is impacted by that, are there things that I can do to slow that process or eliminate that process or even sharpen it as I move forward? So at first blush, those are the first three things I think about. Where did you kind of land in kind of topic areas inside of this? And then we can kind of talk about what you've learned with each one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely that supercharged learning. And if anything, the little subcategory in that are, little children that are just learning their times tables and spelling words and things like that. So certainly I talk about cases like dyslexia and attention problems, right through to maybe, teenage years, adult years, learning new languages, learning a new skill, musical instruments. So absolutely those types of things. What you nailed there right at the end was, what are those things that maybe do impact memory from a lifestyle point of view? And I highlight 6 of them in the book that you can absolutely use something like tapping for. General stress, but also things like depression, so other conditions out there. And then right through, I do actually, because there's a bit of research that's emerging and certainly anecdotal evidence that tapping can help with memory loss disorders. So there is a whole chapter dedicated to how can it be used if someone genuinely is beginning to suffer those, or you've got a family history and it is something you worry about.
Yeah. And so one of the things that really kind of struck me inside of that, you're talking about some of the lifestyle stuff and memory. Like so often we think about memory as a skill because it is a skill and some of us have at less, but what we're not thinking about is the context in which that skill is used. Like I'm a really, really good city driver. I've lived in big cities in the East Coast of the United States for 30 years now. I have no problem with that unless it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I've already driven 14 hours, and then my skill is impacted by that. And so, what are some of the things that impact our memory and our ability to learn? Because I think for most folks, getting a hook into those things, they're going to see how quickly we can attach tapping to those things. So, what were those things that you're discovering, those lifestyle pieces that impact in the moment the ability to learn that sort of stuff? And then we'll talk about the long-term stuff here in a moment.
Yeah, look, the first one I really want to start with before we actually get into those choices that you make with maybe food and alcohol and things like that is belief. The one thing that stands out that I actually really kind of ask in every chapter is, what do you tell yourself about your memory? What do you think about yourself? Because that is absolutely the first thing that people can apply tapping to. But if I was to say, Jean, answer this sentence, I believe I have a blank memory. What word comes to mind? And so often people that kind of say, oh, can't remember people's names, or I, didn't do well memorizing a speech at school, they'll have a belief around the quality of their memory. And that is absolutely in any area, and something we can do with little kids as well, target that belief through something like tapping. And then, like you said, there are other lifestyle things that even at a physiological level will impact structure of memory, access to memory. They are absolutely things like too much sugar in our diet creates inflammation. Obviously, alcohol can go with that, blood pressure, obviously stress, but sleep quality, that type of thing as well. So again, those things, just one by one, can be targeted if within each of those there are some issues that people might, benefit from, doing some tapping to relieve certain behaviors.
And the thing I love about all those lifestyle pieces that you're talking about, the stuff that we consume, the way that we sleep, all of those sorts of things, that is going to impact lots of areas of our life. So if I'm sitting down and I'm going, I would like to improve my memory and I'm going to address this through the lens of sleep, we just know all the valuable things that come from that, or the amount of refined sugar that I'm eating, or because I have ADHD and I'm dyslexic, I know the way that nightshades impact my ability to be focused or to be distracted, because I get a little antsy when I've had lots of nightshades in my system just because of the way it responds. And so when we're recognizing these things, like it shows up in lots and lots of places, that I think that's really encouraging to look at that particular way. The other thing I want, like, that you mentioned there, and I think is so important, is this idea about belief. One of the places that I spend my free time is watching and playing and thinking a lot about poker. Because for me, it's the intersection of two things that I love: math and probability, and reading other humans and the human interaction side of all of that. And there is, it's mostly anecdotal, but there's this huge amount of evidence that when you think you're playing well, you actually play better, because you're in a circumstance where you're trusting, like, I have a difficult decision, and if I'm playing well, I confidently make the decision. If I'm not playing well, I hedge, and then I'm much more likely to make an error. I can see the exact same thing with memory. Like, there is a person in my life who the thing that he remembers the most is the fact that he has a really good memory. And because he remembers he has a really good memory, he assumes what he is remembering is true. Now, it's not always true, but his ability to navigate the world significantly more decisively, because he's not questioning whether or not he has the right answer. And if I'm telling myself the story, well, I don't really have a very good memory, maybe it was this restaurant, maybe it wasn't, maybe that's her name, maybe it's not. And I know I don't like to be wrong, and I don't want to look foolish. And so if I'm questioning my memory, then even if I remembered something accurately, I'm less likely to be fully present to the conversation or the activity or the relationship or whatever is in front of me.
Yeah, and it's almost like this one big confirmation bias. Whatever you tell yourself about that, you're either going to doubt, was that what I remembered, or that person's name, or where I put my car keys, or the password. I have this whole section about passwords we now have to remember on the internet. Or am I really confident in my ability, because I do believe I have a good memory, whether that's for people's names or if I'm going to the store and I've got 3 things I need to buy, that type of thing. We're confirming based on that very first premise, which is, what do I believe about my memory? So I really do start with that and encourage anyone, whether they're tapping on memory issues or reading the book or whatever, come back and ask yourself, what do I tell myself? And, what was I told growing up? What do my parents tell themselves about their memory? Because certainly we kind of copycat a lot of the time, and but they're highly tappable issues.
And as you lean into this sense of confirmation bias, I think the other thing we lay over the top of that is the negativity bias. That we're much more likely to remember the times that went wrong than the times that went right. Like, I live in a 6th floor walk up. 4 times today, I walked up 78 stairs to get to my apartment. I have absolutely no recollection of being in the stairwell as I sit here and think about it, because it happened successfully. I can tell you the 3 times that I've tripped in the last 10 years walking up those stairs, where I was in the building, who was watching me, and one of the times the exact shape the milk made on the floor after the carton broke open. And so if we're in a circumstance where we have stories of times that our memory failed us, we're much more likely to remember them. And so, and the reason I bring that up is I don't want to say that I'm just going to go tap on the fact that I don't have a believe in myself. I'm going to now go believe in myself. Like, sometimes it's hard for us to believe, but entering through the lens of, oh, my subconscious mind is disproportionately remembering the times I failed at this. Therefore, I've written the story that I failed at this. What are the times that I remembered things? What are the times that I successfully came up with something? What were the times where, and so I'm not just pumping my own tires because belief is going to get me there. I'm actually leaning into the problem and recognizing what's going on subconsciously as we address that story to unroot that, so we're trusting ourselves more.
And you're absolutely right. It is the stories that we're looking for when we're trying to get perhaps complete resolution or a difference in how we kind of perceive things like memory, but other things in life we're tapping on as well. It's those legs of the table. It's the stories. It's the moments in life where something happened, like you said, that confirms at that negativity level that something went wrong in that area. And I am quite kind of concrete, if you like, in the book chapters, just to sort of, encourage people to sit there, pen and paper, ask yourself this question, think about this time, to try to find some of those, because you're right, they're those roots that are literally kind of, holding up that tree, and they are the things that we need to get to.
And this is just for everybody listening and watching along. Always tap with a pen and piece of paper in your hand, not just when you're working with a fabulous workbook and the questions Peta has given us, because you know what it's like to have those things disappear. And for me, capturing that data as we're working through something is just so useful as we're continuing to just do that tapping work. So great. So we have this idea of belief. The second piece that you mentioned in there is actually when we're trying to learn something specific. How can we utilize tapping when we are studying, trying to memorize something, trying to engage with a difficult concept? What does that look like for us?
Yeah, so this answer will apply to any age. So even if there's a parent or a teacher working with little ones who are just for the first time learning spelling words or times tables or whatever it might be, right through to you're learning a speech because you're in high school, or you're right through to, adult and you're picking up a musical instrument and really want to learn something. Absolutely recommend that during those moments to keep not only the mind kind of calm, but the body as well. As much as possible, if you can tap at the same time that you're taking in new information. So that could be that I'm learning my times tables, they're in front of me, but that child is actually physically tapping while that's happening, right through to you're learning the speech. I always talk about, and in the book I outline my TED talk that I had to do, which I found out at the last minute there would be no teleprompter, and I physically wasn't allowed to turn around and look at the slides behind me as a prompt. So I had to know this 18-minute speech. So when I learnt it, stuck on the outside of my shower, because that was a nice place to kind of put it, physically tapping at the same time I was rote learning, right through to obviously playing a musical instrument, learning a second language. So do outline a story there. You can tap at the same time or before and after. the actual, if you need both hands, that type of thing. Because what you're doing in that moment is keeping everything online at a brain level and cortisol low. If there was any kind of nervousness or a bit of stress coming out, or I can't do this kind of thought system, you're actually keeping that quite low by actually tapping at the same time. So as much as humanly possible, anything new, reading something you're trying to really take in and retain, 1 point will do. Just keep tapping at the same time.
And that's one of those things that it's really good for us to hear out loud. And the moment we hear it out loud, it's like, duh, of course. You know, when I'm in a better resource state, if I'm doing something difficult, I'm going to do a better job of that thing. Like, it's just like that's just the simplest, like, kind of sense of being in a human body in the world. But I oftentimes, you know, like, I apply it in one area of my life and I don't think to apply it in another area of my life. And so saying it out loud is great. And the other thing is, like, I you know, just spend a lot of time with my left hand up here. In the beginning, it feels kind of like, you know, you're trying to walk and chew gum and rub your belly and pat your head at the exact same time, until all of a sudden it's completely second nature. And you will find yourself in a circumstance where you won't think to tap. The moment a pencil comes into your hand, it will just be part of that particular process and it'll become second nature for you.
Yeah, totally agree.
So then let's talk about some of the kind of long-term stuff when we're dealing with a family history that might have memory issues, dementia, things like that, or just, you know, like recognizing that, you know, father time is undefeated at this particular point. And, you know, at some point we're going to be impacted by the fact that we are in physical bodies that are not going to last forever. What does the research say around kind of the long-term stuff, the stuff that's epigenetic, the stuff that is just deterioration? How do we approach that?
Yeah, and really, you know, full acknowledgement here that some of the memory loss disorders truly are genetically kind of contributed, and then we have other ones that perhaps might be more lifestyle, you know, perpetuated. So for any of those, one of the things that does stand out when you look at family members who have had someone that has suffered one of these and what they think and feel is most of the time they actually have an intense worry or stress or concern, distress about following that same pathway, whether or not it's genetic, epigenetic, or even lifestyle driven. There is this worry when they watch someone else in the family suffer from one of these memory loss disorders. So we do kind of really encourage people that if that is in your family, regardless of the nature of where that comes from, to actually sit back and acknowledge you can do something about your own worry in the here and now, because that's a future-oriented sort of situation. So if you genuinely do have a high standard of worry, distress about that. And it may be that working with a practitioner is a better idea here to help you with that. And the other thing, you know, just to sort of flag again, which I know we've talked about many times, but certainly other researchers will as well, is EFT tapping has actually been shown to change gene expression. Now, that hasn't necessarily been looked at in terms of, you know, dementia onset and diagnosis, but it's absolutely been looked at in terms of the stress response or PTSD response in and inflammation and cancer suppression in DNA expression. So not only obviously are we making ourselves feel calmer when we're doing tapping, but we may well be having some epigenetic and DNA expression outcome and impact there. So anyone with those family histories, I would absolutely encourage them to sit back and have that, again, pen and paper, journaling about, how do I feel? What do I think my risk is? And even to start there with some tapping.
And for those of you who are listening along who are really interested in this particular piece of it, I have 2 interviews with Mark Wolin, who is one of the leading researchers in the world on epigenetics and how trauma is passed along in that particular way. And 2 great conversations with him where you're going to be able to graft that information onto what we're talking about right here in a really beautiful way.
Fantastic. He is. He's a genius.
He really is. And he's an even kinder person than he is being a brilliant person. So kind of like then kind of big picture, walking away from this, what are the things that surprised you? You know, as a scientist, you walk in, you have a hypothesis, you have this lived experience, and if it's a good experiment, more than likely you're going to be surprised in the process. So as you are engaging in this research and kind of wrestling around with this, what are the things that you were surprised by, either disappointingly or pleasantly, as you were engaged in all of this?
It was probably, I love to include real life stories of, action and things like that. So I put a call out to my community of practitioners and people that obviously do tapping on a daily basis and said, hey, has anyone had experiences around, using tapping for memory issues? Tell me. And of course, many cases there of people that had used tapping on their elderly parents who certainly were suffering Alzheimer's or dementia. They were beautiful stories, and just how it had helped things like agitation. But then I did start to get stories, and I guess it's from the mouth of babes, where children, and there's one I'm going to share with you that was just probably that moment of surprise and an idea I had never thought of in using tapping. So this particular woman had written in, she was the grandma, and she said her granddaughter was at home with her this weekend. The granddaughter had misplaced her own phone. And obviously for an 11-year-old, that was a little bit of an anxiety moment and grandma said, well, I don't know where you put your phone. And the granddaughter said, could we do some tapping so I can find? So she wanted to remember where she put her phone. And so that sounds fairly on the surface. Let's just tap on, I can't remember where I've put my phone. But this little granddaughter started to say, I'm going to tap as though I am the phone and I'm lost and I need you to find me. And I just thought, it's just one of those moments. I might have been doing this for 30 years myself, but I'm like, I've never thought to actually tap to be the lost thing. And so I outlined in the story exactly what she said, but she's like, I'm lost. Come and find me. Where would I be? And so this little girl, without any certification in tapping or just that creative way, and I loved it. And it's stories like that, they're the ones that surprise me now. And I get an idea and go, next time I might have lost that person's name, lost the memory for the password, lost whatever, or think I can't do this, I'm going to be the object that I'm trying to see. And I just thought it was genius. I thought it was brilliant.
And the fun part is, because of the work that you do, you were able to go, okay, at a subconscious level, this is working because, and they're doing this and they're doing that. And to her, it didn't matter. Like, it was just, oh, this is an approach I'm going to try. And, and I'm sure you've had this experience as well. Like, teaching kids to tap is so much easier than teaching adults to tap.
100%.
Because they just want to try. They just want better. They're not over analyzing all the stuff. They're just going to dive in and enjoy it with us. So
I often go, I should have been a child psychologist. That would have been so much easier than teenagers and adults. Didn't happen.
These things happen. Next lifetime.
That's right.
Awesomeness. Well, as always, Peta, I appreciate your time, but more importantly, I appreciate just your continued dedication to creating tools and resources so that we can have just thoughtful, useful conversations about all of this stuff. Every single time I talk to you and I talk to David Feinstein and I talk to Dawson, I'm just like, thank you for providing me tools so I can explain this to other people. The book itself is awesome. It's really, really practical. It's really, really useful. This is one of those ones that you're going to want to have for yourself, and then you'll share it with other people. But yeah, I just so appreciate your dedication to all this, Peta.
Oh, thank you so much, Dean. It's always a pleasure talking about anything to do with tapping, but absolutely anything to do with protecting our memories and teaching that to the next generations. Then I feel like my job's done.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Peta. You can see how useful and valuable bringing some tapping into working with our memory can be. If you haven't done so already, please check out her new book, Memory Improvement Through EFT Tapping. If you look in the show notes, you'll see a direct link to it. I got an advanced copy of it. It is an awesome, awesome book. And like all of the things that Peta creates, it's super practical. So it's not just the information and the research, but it's stuff that you can use right away. If you enjoyed this conversation right now on the screen, you will see a link to all of our previous interviews and conversations. All you need to do is click on that to dive in even deeper with the tapping goodness. For Tapping Q&A, it's Gene Monterastelli. Hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.